Hello everyone. In this session, we will be dealing with the white matter of cerebrum. I'm planning to do this session like now I'll be dealing with the introduction of white matter. Then in the coming sessions, I'll be dealing in detail about the same. Okay. So now we will just have a look. What do you mean by white matter of cerebrum? So before moving on to the white matter of cerebrum, you know that the cerebrum, there are two cerebral hemispheres, and each cerebral hemisphere has got an outer cortex and an inner white matter. So what do you mean by cortex and what do you mean by white matter? You have to know what you mean by cortex and white matter before moving into the details of the white matter of cerebrum. So suppose if you just draw a neuron, okay, so if you draw a neuron like this, the region where you get the cell body of neurons, okay, the cell body of neurons, this region is known as the cortex, and the remaining region where you get the nerve fibers, that is your white matter. Okay, so this rim is actually the cerebral cortex, and the inner aspect is made up of the white matter. So in the cerebral cortex, if you look, you will be mostly seeing the cell bodies of the neurons, and the major bulk of the cerebral hemispheres, it is the white matter, which is made up of nerve fibers and the neuroglial cells, the concerned neuroglial cells. Okay, so that is about the white matter of cerebrum. I will be dealing with the details of the cerebral cortex in the coming sessions. So for the time being, you just have an idea about the cerebral cortex like this. There are many regions in the cerebral cortex which are concerned with the motor sensory areas like that. So I will be seeing it in detail soon. For the time being, you know that there are two cerebral hemispheres. The outer one is the outer part is known as the cortex and the inner part is the white matter, and in the cortical region you have the neurons of the cell bodies of the neurons confined, and the white matter is actually the main bulk of the cerebral hemisphere, and that is actually made up of nerve fibers and the neuroglial cells. Okay, now these nerve fibers or the white matter as such, why you need the white matter for the cerebral hemispheres? Because you have to connect the different regions of the cerebral hemispheres within each hemisphere and with the neighboring hemisphere and to other regions of the central nervous system. You have to connect all these regions, then only the brain will work properly, isn't it? So in order to connect these particular regions, you need some fibers. Okay, so that is the main function of white matter of cerebrum. Okay, so you have the nerve fibers extending within the cerebral hemispheres to the neighboring cerebral hemisphere and to other parts of the central nervous system. So according to the extent of these nerve fibers, you can classify the white matter of cerebrum into three types. The first one is the association fiber, the second one is the commissural fiber, and the third one being the projection fibers. Okay, so association fibers, commissural fibers and projection fibers. So let's see what you mean by, what is the term when you say, what do you mean by the term association fibers? So association fibers are a group of nerve fibers which connect the regions of each cerebral hemisphere, that is, they are confined to one single cerebral hemisphere. So if you take one cerebral hemisphere, you will see the association fibers connecting the different regions of the same cerebral hemisphere. Got it? So if you have one cerebral hemisphere here, one cerebral hemisphere here, you have many fibers running within the cerebral hemisphere connecting different regions of the cerebral hemisphere. They are not going to any other regions or any other, it is not moving to the opposite cerebral hemisphere, or it is not moving to other parts of the central nervous system. It is confined to one single cerebral hemisphere. Okay, so such type of fibers are known as association fibers. So you can say that it is within, that means it is intrahemispherical. That is the term we use, intra. Intra means it is confined to that single cerebral hemisphere. Now, what do you mean by commissural fibers? Commissural fibers means it connects, if you consider these two cerebral hemispheres, if there is an identical region exactly like this, these fibers, the commissural fibers, will be connecting these 2 points. Okay, so commissural fibers connects the regions of both cerebral hemispheres which are identical or which are somewhat located in the same region. That is what is meant by commissural fibers. So they actually cross, isn't it? And they connect the two cerebral hemispheres. Hence they are known as commissural fibers. So it is not confined to one single cerebral hemisphere, isn't it? So you call it as interhemispherical. So the commissural fibers are interhemispherical. Now, what do you mean by projection fibers? Projection fibers means the fibers which connects the cerebral cortex with the group of nuclei within the brain. That is, you have the basal ganglia, you have the thalamus. When you go down, you have the brainstem, then you have the spinal cord. So all these things are connected by a set of nerve fibers. That is what is meant by projection fibers. So the projection fibers are not confined to one single hemisphere. They are not just connecting the two cerebral hemispheres, but they are going beyond that. That is, it connects the cerebral cortex with the rest of the central nervous system. So that is how we divide or we group the nerve fibers of the cerebrum. Hope it is clear. Now we will see the examples for each type. The first one we will take, that is the association fibers. So I have just colored it differently. These are the association fibers. Okay, can you see the association fibers? So how will you explain the association fibers? They are actually confined to one single hemisphere. Actually, they connect different regions of the same hemisphere. And they are broadly divided into short and long. Short means the fibers will be short and the long means the fibers will be long. So first one is short. The example for short association fiber is arcuate fasciculus or arcuate bundle. What do you mean by that? You can see that these are the two gyri, right? These are the two gyri, and these two gyri are connected by a bundle, a small U-shaped bundle of fibers along this sulcus, across this sulcus, isn't it? This is actually known as the arcuate fasciculus or arcuate bundle. Here you can see it more clearly. These are the two gyri, and these two adjacent gyri are connected along the sulcus, and this bundle of short fibers are known as arcuate fibers. Now coming to the long association fibers. So long association fibers, you have many examples for the long association fibers. Let's see one by one. The first one is uncinate fasciculus. So before moving on to the long association fibers, you need to know that the cerebrum has got 4 lobes. You have the frontal lobe, you have the parietal lobe, you have the occipital lobe, and you have the temporal lobe. I think all of you will be knowing this. These are the basic points. So these long association fibers are basically connecting the different regions of the different lobes of the same hemisphere. Okay. So long association fibers, the first one is uncinate fasciculus. So this one is the uncinate fasciculus. So how will you explain this uncinate fasciculus? You know that there are two important regions in the frontal lobe here. One, you can say it as the motor cortex, motor speech area, and the other one as the orbital cortex. Okay, so you have the motor speech area and the orbital cortex in the frontal lobe, and that is connected to, this is the temporal lobe, right? So that is connected to the temporal lobe by means of bundle of nerve fibers that is known as uncinate fasciculus. So if you have a closer look at the uncinate fasciculus, you can see that in the middle it is thin and it is just fanning out towards the lobes. Okay, so in the middle the bundle is very thin or narrow and it is fanning out towards the lobes. So that is the first one. So that is comparatively longer compared to the arcuate fasciculus, right? Hence it is known as, it is classified under long association fibers. Now let's see the next one. The next one is cingulum. So cingulate fibers are actually lying beneath the cingulate gyrus. So this is actually a medial view. If you just cut the cerebral hemispheres like this, and if you look at the medial aspect, this is actually the medial view. So the cingulate fibers are, this is the cingulate bundle or cingulum. So this is actually lying beneath the cingulate gyrus and parahippocampal gyrus. We will be seeing the details of the gyri and sulci, how are they arranged in detail. But for the time being, you just remember the cingulate bundle is just lying beneath the cingulate gyrus and parahippocampal gyrus. And let's see what are the two important points connected by this cingulate fiber. So cingulate fiber is actually coming under the limbic association bundle. Okay, so limbic system, limbic association bundle. So cingulum is actually coming under limbic association bundle. So which are the 2 points connected by the cingulum? You have the paraterminal gyrus. Okay, in the frontal lobe you have the paraterminal gyrus and you have the uncus in the temporal lobe. So these two regions are actually connected in a circle-like manner. Can you see? It is just somewhat like a circle and it is connecting in a circle-like manner. Hence it is known as cingulum. Cingulum is otherwise known as girdle. Girdle, for easy understanding, you can just imagine your belt. So it is just like a girdle, right? So it is somewhat circular. So it is just wrapping around. So this cingulum connects the paraterminal gyrus of the frontal lobe with the uncus of the temporal lobe. So that is the cingulum. Now the third one is superior longitudinal fasciculus. From the term itself, you know that it is superiorly seated. Longitudinal means it is longitudinal along the length of the cerebral hemisphere. So out of the fibers mentioned here, this will be the superior longitudinal bundle or superior longitudinal fasciculus, and this is actually said to be the longest of the association fibers. And which are the regions connected by the superior longitudinal bundle or superior longitudinal fasciculus? Here you have the frontal lobe and here you have the occipital lobe, and sometimes it will be radiating to the temporal lobe as well. So superior longitudinal fasciculus or bundle connects the frontal lobe with the occipital and temporal lobe, and they are said to be the longest of the association fibers. The next one is inferior longitudinal bundle or inferior longitudinal fasciculus. It connects the visual association area with the temporal lobe. So if you have a bundle like this here connecting the occipital lobe and the temporal lobe, this is actually the inferior longitudinal bundle. Okay. Now the last one, it is the fronto-occipital bundle. So all these are actually somewhat rhyming, right? So the fronto-occipital bundle is same as that of the superior longitudinal bundle, because fronto-occipital, from the term itself we know that it is extending from the frontal lobe, it is ending in the occipital lobe and sometimes in the temporal lobe. So what is the difference? Is it going through the superior longitudinal fasciculus or is it lying within it? No, it is just lying below the superior longitudinal fasciculus. That's why I have marked it in red color for easy understanding. So this is the fronto-occipital bundle. Okay, just beneath the superior longitudinal bundle. So the areas which it connects are somewhat, the course of the fronto-occipital bundle is somewhat same as that of the superior longitudinal bundle. The only thing is it is just lying beneath the superior longitudinal bundle, and it is actually separated by the fibers of corona radiata. You have the corona radiata going between the two sets of fibers, that is the superior longitudinal bundle and the fronto-occipital bundle, though they are having the same course, are separated by the corona radiata fibers. So that's about the association bundles, the examples. Now coming to the commissural fibers. Commissural fibers, we have already mentioned that they are interhemispherical, that is they connect the identical regions or somewhat the same regions of the two cerebral hemispheres, and the examples are corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is the important, one of the important commissural fibers which we will be seeing in detail in the coming sessions. So this is the corpus callosum. Okay, so you have the corpus callosum here, and this is actually the corpus callosum which is shown here. The other fibers are, you have the anterior commissural fibers, you have the posterior commissural fibers, you have the hippocampal commissural fibers, and you have the habenular commissural fibers. You need not know the details of all these, but you have to know in detail about the corpus callosum, which we will be dealing in detail later. And one important point which you have to remember at this point is the primary visual area as well as the primary somatosensory area of hand. Okay, primary visual area and the primary somatosensory area of the hand, they are not having any commissural fibers. So all these things why I'm mentioning is sometimes you might get these in the options for entrance examinations, which are the areas which are not connected with the help of commissural fibers. So you might get these options. So primary visual area as well as the primary somatosensory area of the hand, they are not having any commissural fibers. Now coming to the projection fibers. Projection fibers, we have already mentioned that these fibers connects the cerebral cortex with the rest of the central nervous system. Like you have the basal ganglia, you have the thalamus, you have the brainstem, you have the spinal cord. So all these regions are connected with the cerebral cortex with the help of projection fibers. So for easy understanding, they have grouped it into two: corticofugal and corticopetal. These two are actually rhyming with the centrifugal and centripetal terms. So what do you mean by centrifuge? So if you do centrifuge something, you know that the sediments are actually centrifuged towards the periphery, isn't it? It's going towards the periphery. So corticofugal means it is away from the cortex. So the fibers which are going away from the cortex, you call it as corticofugal. And what do you mean by centripetal force? Centripetal force means it is directed towards the center. So if you insert this cortico instead of centri, you get corticopetal. So corticopetal means towards, instead of towards the center, it is towards the cortex. So that is the easy way you can remember these things. So corticofugal means the fibers which are running away from the cortex, and corticopetal means the fibers which are running towards the cortex. So these bundle of nerve fibers will be having the nerve fibers running in both directions, towards the cortex as well as away from the cortex. So at this point I would like to add one more point. According to the evolution of the brain, you can classify the brain as archicortex, paleocortex and neocortex. So archicortex is the ancient cortex and the neocortex is the most evolved cortex, human cortex. So archicortex, there are some portions of it remaining. You have the paleocortex remnants in the cerebrum and you have the most evolved neocortex. So this archicortex and paleocortex are together known as allocortex. Archi and paleo together known as allocortex, and the recently evolved cortex is known as neocortex. So the bundle of nerve fibers connecting or confined to the neocortex, you call it as corona radiata and internal capsule. So they are the projection fibers of the neocortex. So you can see the fibers. Can you see this? So these are the corona radiata fibers, and the fibers which pass between, this is the thalamus, this is the caudate nucleus, this is the lentiform nucleus. Okay, so you have a bundle of nerve fibers, actually the continuation of the corona radiata, and running between, you have the caudate nucleus and thalamus on one side medially and you have the lentiform laterally. So between these sets you have a bundle of fibers. This region is actually known as the internal capsule. So again, the internal capsule we will be seeing it in detail. Now coming to the fibers of the allocortex, you have the fimbria and fornix. So you have the fornix here. This is the fornix. So out of the fimbria and fornix, we'll be seeing the fornix in detail. So you need to know about the corpus callosum in detail, you need to know about the internal capsule in detail, and you need to know about the fornix in detail. So this is just an introduction to the white matter of cerebrum. Hope you know what do you mean by white matter. It is nothing but the fibers of the neurons. It is forming the main bulk of the cerebral hemisphere. You are classifying it into association fibers, commissural fibers and projection fibers. Association fibers are intrahemispherical, confined to one single hemisphere. Commissural fibers are interhemispherical, that is they connect the two cerebral hemispheres, and projection fibers means they just project out or the fibers reach the cerebral cortex. That is, they are connecting the cerebral cortex with the rest of the central nervous system. They can be either directed towards the cortex, or they can be either directed away from the cortex, connecting the rest of the central nervous system. So that's just an introduction for the white matter of cerebrum. Keep watching for further sessions. Thank you.